Steadily it rises.
Hey, it's ODB, the Lincoln Addict, back with another video. And for those that continue to return and watch and consume the content, thank you so much. Certainly, I have not stopped or planned to stop doing content here. I've just been busy the past 4+ months working on a big project. Some you can kind of see around me, but more on that in the near future. What I'm here to talk about today is a car that was recently a no sale. What I'm here to talk about today is a car that you can see on the screen here that was recently a no sale on Bring a Trailer. There haven't been a ton of these 60s Lincolns come up for sale the past month or two. That's why I haven't done a lot of these, but I've also I do want to point out that I will try to get through some of these other cars that recently had either sales or no sales, which I think is key. But again, there hasn't been a whole ton of these coming up. Now, there have been some auctions, which, I'll talk about some of those cars in the near future. So please subscribe if you haven't already. The main thing I want to cover today, the 67 Lincoln Continental convertible, you're going to see on the screen 92,500 it was bid to, but it was a no sale, and that was on March 31st. There are 27 comments, so let's dive right into this episode. I want to thank Devious Customs for the continued support of Lincoln Addict Podcast. I'm working on content for the podcast itself, which you'll be able to find those video episodes here as well. If you're in the market for air suspension or even some parts that you could potentially put on more of your non-customized Lincoln, check out deviouscustoms.com. So what I want to do is on my typical documentation that I'll provide, we'll kind of go through this, and I want to spend most of the time on the Bring a Trailer itself website. We know in 67 there were 45,777 units produced. However, keep in mind 2,276 convertibles. That was the lowest year convertibles next to, believe it or not, 1961, which was the new model, which you can see there in the lower right corner, 2,857 produced. This is a little bit older screenshot. I did forget to update this again, but if you're happen to be a Haggerty customer like I am, you can always check their website. What I can continue to tell you is the market, at least up until now, has continued to be very, very strong, and we have continued to see prices on the rise, as Tony and I will always say, as it relates to even the 66 and up models, including this 67 convertible. So, I will spend the bulk of the time here, and what we will notice, the 67 Lincoln Continental convertible, and this is going to tie into probably why the price rose to where it did, but is believed to have been used as a parade vehicle for Queen Elizabeth II and HRH Prince Philip in Canada, 1973 service, and I think it was even used potentially in 1990, so we'll see that. They talk about pretty much the standard stuff here in that first paragraph. It does have a white wall, which is not going to appeal to everyone. Certainly, a lot of people like me, we like white wall tires, but certainly I will tell you, posting these cars often in social media at Lincoln Addict on Facebook and Instagram, people will often chime in saying the wide whites were a 50s thing. Of course, they were on the 1961 Lincoln stock. The listing details, so I continue to see these cars, in that 60,000 mile range, which is just kind of amazing if you think about 50 plus years old. In terms of this car, you are going on 60 plus now for many of these 60s Lincolns. 462, which is standard 3-speed, 15-inch wheels are standard. This does have an 8-track player, which is a little bit different. The car's finished in black, which we can see, and the convertible mechanism for the white top was replaced and equipped with new valves and hydraulic lines. That's a great upgrade that can easily cost several $1,000s, especially if you have an expert like our good friend John Cashman at his business. He recently, he had retired and he's back in business, as I talked about on Lincoln Addict podcast. But certainly doing that upgrade, if you just look at the parts themselves, that can easily be $2,000 plus, depending on what you're looking to pick up. It does have Coker classic white walls, which Coker is obviously a big name brand in the wide white wall world, if you will. They talk about the power seat, they talk about the AM, FM, and then, of course, this right here is one of two. So you see two in the photo. Two dashboard plaques indicate that the car was used as a parade vehicle for, as I mentioned, those individuals, including there's one there for 1990. We can see here from this shot on the driver's side, the interior does look pretty nice. And you see that factory 8-track player in the dash, which I believe is pretty rare, but I don't have specifications on how rare that is. I rarely see it on my side. There were some services completed in 2023, which talks about rebuilding the fuel pump, replacing the voltage regulator. Typical things, including like the fan shrouds on these years, they will tend to break. So that's definitely a big thing. What we can see from the VIN is Bring a Trailer does a fantastic job. They break down the VIN number, which I'll go ahead and jump over here. I like to kind of give a little bit of a visual when I cover this. And essentially what you're going to see here is the VIN, of course, ends with 06294, which means that it was the 6,294th built in that consecutive unit number out of that almost 46,000. G, of course, represents, as I often reference on this channel, the G represents the MEL 462, which is the Mercury Edsel Lincoln 462. Oftentimes, people will walk up to these 60s Lincolns and go, wow, what does it have a 462? That's a very standard number that people remember. And it's similar to a lot of, I don't want to say a lot of folks, people, and I'm a big fan of the truck scene. Oftentimes I'll see people, if they see I had a 79 C30 dually, and they'll often equate that to a 454 all the time. And mine did have a 454, but a 454 in the Chevy world, 462 in the Ford world, those are numbers that people remember. But the 462 was used, as I've reinforced, about 2.5 years, 67, and a partway through 68. This is just something that I put here in case you ever want to take a screenshot. This is from the actual big book. If you own one of these cars or plan to own one, I always highly suggest that you buy one of these books. They are reproduced and there's a lot of information. A lot of the information I share is actually from these books, believe it or not. Bring a Trailer breaks this down, but what we can see there is the date 13J. That represents September 13th. So the visual on the right side is essentially I've got the grid. There's no I. People have reinforced to me, and I have verified that, of course, in the book. The I could be easily mistaken for a 1, so we know J is September. 13th is the day of the month, so September 13th, 1966. I know some folks, and I used to kind of scratch my head. I'm like, 1966. Yes, if you recall, the auto manufacturers, everyone's a little bit different, but they would start or begin to ramp up production late in the summer of that, previous year, right? As they're phasing out the current models and they're they wanted to be ready to rock and roll for the new year. So the pros of this listing, I'm just going to basically discuss these. I do sometimes list them, but it's just easier to kind of speak to, and I think people appreciate the visual more often than just the stuff on the screen. A few things that stick out: one, it's a black car. It is a 67. Okay, my preference is 66, 67. I do love these models. Not everybody does. A lot of people said they don't like the changes that were made to the style. It's where the industry was kind of going, as we got into closer to the 70s. It's black and it's a 67. I like the 66 more now that I've looked at these cars for so many years, but I would not turn down a 67 at all because they're still awesome to me. We can see here from the front three-quarter shot and the side shot, the car looks like it's in pretty good condition. We do see on the right of the fuel filler, there is the keyhole. That is to insert the key, to turn it left or right, to put the top up or down. That's a feature. It's contrary to what people believe, that is not on all of the convertibles. In 66 and 67, that's when that, this was utilized. But it's definitely convenient, especially if you were going golfing. I know some people will laugh because they'll say, well, hey, the golf clubs won't fit in the trunk of the car with the top down. They actually will. And there was a guy that I became friends with in South Florida that had bought a custom Lincoln. Don't get me started on that. It had all kinds of woes. And he sent me photos of putting his golf clubs in the trunk of the car and going to play golf. So they certainly do fit. There's not a lot of space, though, to be honest, when the trunk is is full of the convertible top, if that makes sense. We can see it does have the Colorado plate, which I think ties into what the listing stated. These are great photos. They took it to some sort of parking garage, if you will. And these are the photos I like to see. Of course, I do like to see some of the detail as well. Oftentimes, with some of the shiny parts on these cars, they're not always perfect, but it is good to kind of get an understanding of what you would be looking at. You can see, I'm not a paint on body expert, but you can see a little bit of an orange peel on the paint. Paint is tough. Black cars, anybody will tell you whether they're detailers or they're owners of a black car. Black is a tough car to maintain. Although, as we've reinforced on this channel, a lot of people want a black Lincoln, believe it or not. Not all of us, but many of us do. It does appear that the wheel covers, aka hubcaps, are polished. That's what it looks like, at least here. And that would be a custom type thing, custom touch, because they are a brushed finish, but I do like them either way. John Cashman continued to reinforce this to me in 66 and, of course, equivalent in 67. This bar was added by Lincoln, and that was a defect in 64 and 65. Those two model years, you have to add a bar. There's a video on my channel on how to do that. It's very easy, but this bar is very, very stout. It's welded in and it's way thicker than you probably would even need, but it's fantastic that it's there. Again, that's factory. We can see the upgraded pump. Prior to 66, the pump was over here on the passenger side, rear quarter panel, kind of underneath that curtain, if you will, but it is here in 66 and 67. This does look brushed here. It might just be a nice clean finish. It looks brushed here, so again, I could be mistaken on the wheel covers. It is important to look at, if you're looking at one of these cars in person or online, looking at all of these trim pieces, because believe it or not, pretty much everything you see other than the window switch is not reproduced. Now, there's one exception to that. These pods, if you will, that everything kind of bolts onto, those are reproduced because they're very brittle. And for someone that kind of rips these cars apart or doesn't take the time, they often break these pods. And those are reproduced by Mark II Industries, if I recall correctly. But they're pretty expensive. They're way more expensive than you would think. But it is good to kind of look at all of that pot metal, look at, some of the finish and things like that to see what we're looking at. We can see it does have what appears to be the factory. Now, these are also reproduced, so they could be reproduction. So that's something to keep in mind. We can see that interior looks pretty good. The seat looks like what I would expect for that year. The mileage ties in. The carpet on the bottom here looks good. Overall, I would think this car, at least from these angles, appears to be pretty nice. We can see that it has the bench seat, which we often refer to as bucket seats. They're individual contour adjustable seats, technically. Does not have the bucket seat option. It's hard to tell if it has the headrest that goes up. It doesn't look like it, but there was a headrest. I think it was mostly on the bucket seats. We can see here the 462. The engine bay looks really good. We got the blue valve covers and the blue air cleaner, which is great. And we have the fan shroud still on it. Again, these will tend to crack over time. I think there's someone that reproduces them. We can see the factory blue in here, which is great. It's possible this engine was pulled. I don't know if we can see it in the paperwork, but if it wasn't, it certainly is pretty dang clean. It also has the 3-port fuel pump, which is key. I've talked about that a lot. It also has a battery disconnect. This might be a cheap alternative to some of the higher end pieces that you can buy on the market, but this right here is worth its weight in gold. You twist that green knob and it will disconnect. In most cases, you'd have it on the negative side, but that'll ensure that any vampire draw of the power, these older cars, whether I think on my 65, had the light was staying on in the glove box and the battery drains, and that's no fun. So certainly you can easily disconnect with one of those. So there's a lot of good that I've talked about. Now, if we transition briefly and we talk about what are some things to consider, and the biggest thing to consider was on this car, more than likely, it didn't sell for the price. I thought that it would have, the person would have lifted the reserve. But because of the connection to Queen Elizabeth II and so on, and Prince Philip, that's probably why the person was maybe looking for additional funds, right? In terms of, hey, I think this car is worth more to that individual, and that's fine. I will tell you, though, the biggest challenge that I see with this car, underneath this car looks very nice, okay? someone has went and spent some time and they've undercoated this car, they've sprayed it with black, whatever they've done with a lizard skin, rhino liner, if you will, style product, right? Those are kind of some of the brand names. The one thing that I would caution people on that, this takes a lot of work, okay? There's time and money involved in doing all this. Although the one thing you want to be cautionary about, and I can't say for sure on this car, it looks very clean underneath. If you look here on the transpan, you do see some drips. These cars are known to leak, okay? This looks really, really, really clean, okay? Not a bad thing. Someone could have recently pressure washed this or spent countless amount of times detailing it, and I tip my cap. That's fantastic. When you look at a car like this and you typically don't see all this nice black paint underneath, you go, wow, it looks great. And that could be a fantastic thing. I will tell you though, what you have to be careful of is in these different areas, the floor pans I've talked about, and these wheel well areas, you would want to ensure that there's no funny business going on underneath it. And I'm not saying that there is. I'm never here to degrade a seller. What I'm here is to help bring more attention to things you need to look at. So if you look here, to me, when I look at this rocker area, it looks like there's been a little bit of work in here. Okay. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Older cars, depending on where they were utilized, especially in the winters, they could rust in certain areas, and that's fine. And if somebody went in and did some rust repair, hey, more power to them. That happens all the time. No harm, no foul. However, you want to be cautious. There's a guy that I watch on YouTube. I think I mentioned him a couple times, Uncle Tony's Garage. Little opinionated on things, kind of an old hot rod guy. I appreciate his content. He's got a buddy named Kiwi, and Kiwi has a channel. Uncle Tony would often go over to Kiwi's place, okay? Sounds kind of crazy, but Kiwi runs an upstanding business. And so many people have bought cars at auctions and taken their car to Kiwi to go, hey, we need to get this done. And they start chipping around with screwdrivers and this and that. And, people have taken fastback Mustangs and converted them into convertibles and just crazy things. So the cautionary thing that I would tell anybody is someone could maybe show us photos and go, wow, this car was perfect underneath. There's no rust. It was absolutely flawless. And all we did was scrape it and we reapplied an undercoating. Okay, great. Do they have photos? Can they maybe show us that? But when somebody comes in here and blows all this in with a rhino liner, I reference that, it could be something underlying underneath there. Now, if there's not, and this was all done the right way, and maybe it wasn't even rusty, fantastic. I mean, I'll tell you right now, who wouldn't want to have a car that's all underlined like that or undercoated like this? I mean, it's fantastic. And I've seen, like my friend Jeff at Devious Customs and his employees, they've done it where they take these cars down to a shell. Some people will do it where they'll take like a tinfoil type material and they'll wrap everything, exhaust and everything, and then they'll just go underneath and clean and do their thing, and then they'll spray, right? They'll do the prep and then they'll spray. But if you're taking a shell, which I've seen, and you're spraying everything underneath it, it's a lot of work. So again, that's my cautionary item on this particular car. There are receipts, which is fantastic. The challenge is, if I was looking to buy this car, I would ask if the person could email me the receipts, because unfortunately we can't read them. And I think I zoomed in a little bit. This is great. I want to give kudos to the seller, because having this literature, some of these old Continental comments, some of the receipts, some of these extra clips and stuff like that, an extra hubcap, if you will, that stuff goes a very, very long way. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and say, listen, I know I rattled on a little bit about the undercoating. The main thing that you have to do as a potential buyer of any vehicle, not just a Lincoln. Now, these are particular in my mind because they are unibody cars, right? Other cars are as well. But you just have to do your due diligence, especially if you're talking about spending six figures. The last thing you want to do, no matter if you're buying, which I don't recommend, buying maybe through social media often, especially if you're exchanging money without being there and shaking the person's hand and seeing the car. Very cautious about sending anybody money, right? Without vetting the person, right? Or going and visiting the car and things like that. But with that being said, you just have to be super cautious. I could start a podcast where I talk about nightmares. And I'm not talking about when you go to sleep. I'm talking about car nightmares of people that have bought cars and don't realize what they're getting into. It's kind of one of the reasons why I stopped helping people sell. Some of you guys will know in 2019, I left a position that I had worked at for over 2 decades, loved my job, made a decision just to do something different in life. And in 2019, I had very good success moving, buying and selling cars to help people. Hey, you're looking for this. Okay, let's find you that. Let's get this car a good home. You don't want it anymore, that type of thing. And I was going by the Lincoln broker, which is ironic because someone else is kind of using that moniker. Hey, that's fine. But now they are. But the thing I would caution you, people reach out to me sometimes and I can make a phone call here and there for friends and I can go, hey, do you happen to know this car? And they'll go, stay away from that car. Okay. You have to do your due diligence. If you can't get your eyes on a car, you got to have somebody go look at it. I've seen examples of people. I'm not going to give the full details, but I'll give you this quick story. There was a car. I often talk about do not leave these cars idling. Okay, without your foot on the brake. There was a car that a person drove to a restaurant, we'll say, in the greater Tampa Bay area. And the valet drove, basically did something weird, either left it, I think he left it idling or something like that, or maybe the owner did. But the car went over an embankment and it was kind of like dangling, like think about like Beetlejuice, right? The beginning of that film. And the car was like teeter-tottering and it had damage underneath the car. These cars are tough, but it had damage. And that was a car that was being sold. And somebody had reached out to me and I made one phone call and I talked to somebody and I was like, hey, do you happen to know anything about this particular car? And they said two words, stay away. Okay. I know I can tell you a lot about the car, so on and so forth. So, those are things I know, like even me, there's going to be times when, you're not going to have that one story from that one person that happens to know. I totally get it. But if I had any goal in the rest of my life in terms of helping people buy a car or sell a car, it's through this YouTube channel and just reinforcing to people, do your due diligence, do the best you can. I don't have the time, unfortunately, to look at every email and look at every listing and to help every single person. I don't even really, even if somebody goes, hey, I'll pay your fee. What's your fee? And I gave them a number and they paid it. I still don't have the time. And it's no disrespect. It's just, I have other things I want to do in my life. So I go, hey, I can't get on the phone with somebody for an hour and talk to them about it. But I can do these videos, which I find joy in, and I can reinforce to you, the viewer, do your due diligence. Much love, much respect. Thank you for all the support. If you like what I'm doing here, you can leave a thanks via a thumbs up or a comment that actually helps the channel. You can even I think you can even leave like a tip if you want. Certainly, I want to continue to contribute to the Lincoln community any way that I can. I want to give a shout out to Tony Boss Bolin, his Lincoln, Death Row Lincolns. He's on Instagram, but he has shirts and all kinds of cool stuff for sale. I keep tapping the wrong side because it's the reverse view. Take care, everyone. Have a safe weekend. Peace.
Welcome to LA where the players play, and we ride on them things like every day.